Hey everyone, KyberQ here. Before we get into the video, I want to quickly mention that to celebrate the channel hitting 200 subs, I'll be doing a special Q&A video. I'd love to answer your questions if you want to know more about how I make these videos, or if you want to ask about movies, TV, my art and animation work, or anything fun like that, or even if you have a suggestion for me. Please drop it in a comment on this video. Looking forward to seeing what questions you have in store for me. Now on to the video. Stupid Cloaca. When you hear the name Star Wars The High Republic, you may think about Yoda and the Jedi in their frat boy college days smoking death sticks in their dorm room in 420 BBY. Or maybe that was just me. As much as I would have loved to see that, what we got is still pretty cool. The long-awaited High Republic initiative, first announced as Project Luminous, is in many ways a throwback to when the novels and comics of the expanded universe were the backbone of Star Wars. It harkens back to when multimedia projects like KOTOR and Shadows of the Empire were the premier storytelling events in the franchise. With the High Republic era set hundreds of years before the Skywalker saga, Lucasfilm is offering a blank canvas to authors and artists to have creative freedom to create their own characters and tell their own stories, untethered to the baggage of the rest of the franchise. As if that's not exciting enough, we have some really talented Star Wars authors leading the charge. Claudia Gray, Daniel Jose Older, Kevin Scott, Justina Ireland, and more. Fans can look forward to a completely fresh slate, ripe with vast storytelling potential, and become acquainted with new characters, vehicles, creatures, planets, and ideas along the way. It's an incredibly fascinating new era that I'm looking forward to learning more about. And if Light of the Jedi is any indication, the High Republic really is going to be something special in the long run. Like that chicken nugget I left in my pocket from last month. Tastes like victory. Light of the Jedi, written by Charles Soule, who also wrote quite a few of the Star Wars Marvel comics, is intended to be a jumping on point for anyone wanting to get into the Mile High Club. The High Republic. Acting as the first true novel of this new initiative, it throws us into the Star Wars galaxy roughly 200 years before the events of The Phantom Menace. Technological developments in Bacta and hyperspace lanes are in its relatively early days. The High Republic, guided by Chancellor Lina Soh, is slowly but surely expanding its reach from the core worlds. Amid the approaching launch of Starlight Beacon, a multifunctional space station acting as a shining light for travelers in the unexplored regions of the Outer Rim. It is a period of peace and prosperity, but when a hyperspace accident known as the Great Disaster strikes, it unleashes a torrent of chaos and destruction upon the galaxy. The esteemed Jedi Order acts swiftly to defend the citizens of the Republic, while also warding off a dangerous syndicate of space marauders capitalizing off the disaster. Right off the bat, Light of the Jedi has a lot on its plate. Not only does it have to establish a completely new era of Star Wars, along with its new characters, backstories, society, and culture, but also be able to branch off into several different narratives beyond this novel. I mentioned that this is the jumping on point for the High Republic, and it's a remarkably solid start, but I'd even go as far as to say this is a perfect jumping on point for Star Wars in general. I think the die-hard fans will enjoy this just as much as a newcomer to the franchise would. It's free from the years upon years of storytelling baggage that comes with the other pieces of media. Your enjoyment of this novel is not going to be reliant on an encyclopedic knowledge of the rest of the franchise. The clean slate approach here lends itself well to the accessibility of Light of the Jedi, so this can be enjoyed by both longtime fans and Star Wars virgins. A virgin Star Wars fan. I know, big shocker. Striking that perfect balance between fresh and familiar is a tough juggling act, especially with a franchise that's been going as long as this one has. But I really do think that Charles Soule pulls it off. He understands the core imagery and philosophy that draws people to Star Wars, but demonstrates a willingness to experiment and challenge these ideas in a way that feels exciting. Light of the Jedi very effectively introduces the Force, with a focus on how it resonates distinctly with different Force users. It works through Avar Kriss, one of the biggest names of the High Republic initiative, with a very musical, symphonic quality. On page 106, Soule says, "What she heard was a song." Jedi Padawan Bariaga sees himself as a small leaf on a great tree. Soule explains that they really try to lean into the idea that every Jedi has their own connection to the Force, and that allows them to experience it in their own way. I loved all these different metaphors and how they illuminated the idea of every Jedi having their own personal connections and experiences with the Force. The imagery of Jedi fashion with its stark whites and shining golds evokes the very different status of the High Republic Jedi, where they are revered as watchful protectors and beacons of light and hope, compared to the manipulated warmongers and soldiers they're often seen as in a different era like the Clone Wars. Here they're working with the Republic as opposed to for the Republic, and that's a very strong distinction. In the opening scenes of The Phantom Menace, we witness how the Jedi have started to become pawns of the Republic, being enlisted to settle petty trade disputes, their sense of purpose bogged down by politics and procedure. George Lucas was presenting the start of the downfall of the Jedi Order, more so than showing them at their peak. The opening scenes of Light of the Jedi shows the Jedi in their prime, where 100 Jedi along with Republic personnel waste no time springing into action in a heroic rescue effort once the great disaster strikes. And I love when a Star Wars story is able to enrich the rest of the saga. It adds so much to the tragedy of the Order's downfall when we get to travel back to witness the Jedi in their prime, in their golden age. One of the recurring lines you're going to read over and over throughout this book is, "We are the Republic," a greeting/affirmation shared between characters, and it couldn't be more fitting for this new era, where the Republic and the Jedi are working hand in hand to light the way for the rest of the galaxy. Also helps that the Chancellor is an actual decent human being and not a two-faced Sith Lord pulling the strings. Sorry, Papa Palpatine. Because of this absence of corruption, the Jedi Order feels more united than it's ever been, and is more deeply connected to the Force than ever. They have an almost radiant, mystical presence, and what they can achieve through the Force in this novel is mind-blowing. Soule knows better than to portray them as all-powerful and all-knowing though. They acknowledge their weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and Light of the Jedi never crosses the line into overpowered superhero territory. It's clear that the Force is working through them as opposed to them bending the Force to their will. Avar Kriss admits that they are not gods, page 68. The Force abilities and action scenes never feel like empty spectacle because readers will understand the physical and mental exertion that comes with being a Jedi. Some Jedi even die from using the Force. Where Light of the Jedi starts to falter in its overambition is with the sheer number of named characters introduced. It does jump around quite often between multiple storylines, but there were one or two of them that didn't quite hit the mark and didn't go anywhere. I know it's up to this first novel to really set the stage for the rest of the High Republic project, and these characters will have bigger roles in future stories. I just felt like some storylines hurt the pace of the book and could have been cut out. I definitely connected with some characters more than others. Avar Kriss was a really interesting character for the brief time we get to spend with her. She's someone I'm really looking forward to seeing more of. We get a solid coming-of-age storyline with the Padawan Bel Zettifar, accompanied by his master Loden Greatstorm. And come on, Loden Greatstorm, how can you not love that name? I thought both of them had an engaging dynamic. And of course, I loved Burryaga, who is a Wookiee Jedi. I mean, that pretty much mixes two of my favorite types of Star Wars characters, Jedi and furries. And then we have the antagonists of the novel, the scum and villainy of the High Republic. A cult of marauders called the Nihil. Where the Jedi champion unity and peace, the Nihil crave anarchy and death. The Nihil are these imposing Mad Max-esque agents of chaos with no code of honor. Whenever the book switches to focus on the Nihil, it feels like such a harsh contrast to the Jedi storylines, from their drug-induced raves to the backstabbing power play within their organization. It was a fun change of pace. They still managed to be terrifying villains, but I thought they were an absolute delight to read about. I loved all the striking weather-based sci-fi punk imagery associated with them, and all the colorful, wacky creatures that populate their ranks. There's even a Gungan Nihil called Wet Bub, one of the other standout characters for me. I just love all the insults the Nihil hurl around. Like, there's one point where Wet Bub is called a stupid cloaca, page 306. That actually made me laugh out loud. Reading about the Nihil and their history was just as enjoyable as reading about the Jedi. The Nihil aren't calculating, purposeful villains. They're essentially just a group of space pirates capitalizing on the Great Disaster using their mastery of hyperspace. So it's quite interesting seeing these low-life criminals being worthy adversaries to the Jedi. Jedi-centric stories in Star Wars are 9 times out of 10 about the conflict between the light side and the dark side. So it's refreshing to see them being pitted against non-Force wielders. Soul gets to evaluate the inner turmoil of the Jedi during an era that's absent of the shroud and influence of the Sith. And I can imagine that being a challenging undertaking for the High Republic team. How can we create conflict for the Jedi without having the dark side? Throughout this entire novel, I can only remember the dark side being mentioned maybe once or twice, which felt like a very deliberate choice. It really intrigued me to see the Nihil challenge the Jedi's power, expose their vulnerabilities, and force them to make extremely tough decisions. That's definitely the strength of this novel, when it gets to explore what the Jedi stand for and what it means to embody one. With Light of the Jedi, Charles Soule continues to prove that he can cover the broad strokes of what people love about Star Wars, while also being able to delve into the nuance of its themes. The Great Disaster that kicks off the story is one of the greatest, most thrilling action scenes I've ever read in a Star Wars novel. It takes up a good chunk of the first half of the book, and I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I was concerned that the book was going to peak early as a result, but it consistently kept me hooked even with the quieter moments, until things ramped back up again in the climax. And we end this first book on a note that felt in equal parts dark and hopeful, with the closing chapters planting the seeds of what's in store for the future. With just one book, it already feels like the High Republic is brimming with narrative potential. And I'm already starting to read the other books in the series. While the number of characters involved feels daunting and it was tough to keep track of everyone's names after a while, I really connected with a lot of them. And I appreciated that they weren't afraid to kill quite a few of them off to raise the stakes. I recommend this if you're a Star Wars fan who is curious about the High Republic and wants to get into it. This sets a lot of the groundwork and is definitely where you should start. Or if you know a newcomer who wants to get into Star Wars, it's still accessible enough that I think this would be a real treat for them too. It has plenty of Jedi action, Force-based philosophy, villainous gangsters, mystery, and intrigue. All the ingredients of a great Star Wars adventure. I give Light of the Jedi a score of a cyberpunk Gungan. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll definitely talk about the other High Republic novels in future videos, so I'm currently making my way through Into the Dark and The Rising Storm, so you can look forward to those. Also wanted to drop another reminder to comment any questions for me that you want me to answer for my 200 subs Q&A. This is Kyber Q, and remember, we are the Republic.